What should John Thune and the Republicans do? Should just stand firm? Should they be willing to negotiate? They need probably, I mean, if you get every Republican, you need 7 votes. I don't know that Rand Paul is ever going to be with you, so that's probably 8. What do they need to do considering the math?
You know, it is absolutely remarkable to me. Chuck Schumer has said 1,000 different times on the Senate floor and in interviews across the country that a government shutdown would be catastrophic for the American people. He said that there are no winners, only losers in a government shutdown. And yet here he is shutting down the government. And he's not just shutting down the government over a clean CR. He's demanding that they put in a liberal, package that the American people have already voted against to really truly double down on the same failed policies that they lost on in 2024. So it's remarkable to me that we have the Senate Democrats that are in this position where all of a sudden they want to shut down the government.
All right, guys, I hope you had a good weekend. I always feel like I say another big week in Washington, as if like there's ever going to be a boring one. Maybe Christmas week. I don't know. But a lot happening. We are 24 hours out. Well, just over 24 hours out from the government shutting down. President Trump meeting with the Democrats and all the leaders today. The bottom line is I do think that, I mean, these guys don't have a good hand. Normally Republicans are the guys without a good hand. But the deal on the table is to keep the government running, and we'll get into this without just at current levels. This should be something that they should love. Former Republican National Committee Chair Michael Whatley is here with us. He is the Trump Republican nominee in the North Carolina Senate. This is a critical seat. If you care about the Trump agenda and holding the Senate, it has to. If you don't hold North Carolina, we're screwed. I mean, there's no other way about this. So this is a key seat. The Dems recruited former Governor Roy Cooper, very popular in the state. Whatley's going to have the full backing of President Trump and his whole team. But this is going to be a critical race, and he's going to tell us what they're doing to win it. But as I said, the government's shutting down 24 hours from now. Steve Scalise, the majority leader in the House, laid it out perfectly. Take a listen.
We passed a bill through the House to keep the government from shutting down. Hakeem actually whipped his members to shut the government down. He voted that way. But luckily, we were able to get the bill passed. So right now it's over in the Senate, and it's on Chuck Schumer and Democrats in the Senate to keep the government from shutting down. And I hope they'll come to their senses and do that early next week.
Now, just to be clear, I want everyone to understand this because the media will not tell you this. The House of Representatives passed a bill to keep the government open for 7 weeks, straight up. What they call a clean CR. That means a continuing resolution, 100% clean. All it does is continue the current levels going forward for 7 more weeks so they can continue to negotiate. Okay. President Trump says he'll sign that bill. The Senate's the only thing standing in the way. The Senate, yes, the Republicans have a majority, but they only have 53 votes. That's if Rand Paul and some others vote with him. So Democrats would need to do this. John Thune, as I said, the Senate majority leader, he talked about that as well. Take a look.
This is a simple 7-week funding resolution to allow us to do a normal appropriations process, something that Democrat senators have said that they want to see done, but something that Leader Schumer didn't do when they had the majority. They didn't do appropriations bills. This is new leadership. We're trying to do appropriation bills in the old-fashioned way, in an open, transparent way, where the Appropriations Committee writes the bills with Democrat and Republican input, reports them out to the floor, where we have an open amendment process. This is simply about keeping that appropriations process going. I don't know where what we're supposed to be negotiating. We did this 13 times when they had the majority, and in every circumstance, Republicans delivered the votes, so much so that the lowest vote count on all 13 of those was 65 senators. This is a simple, straightforward deal to keep the government running, so for the next 7 weeks, we have an opportunity to finish the appropriations process. So they're trying to hijack it and load up all this liberal special interest stuff that they're working with these outside groups to do. It's politics. It is political posturing. They are afraid of their base, and they're trying to do something to get them motivated and not angry at them.
I mean, I'm sorry. Every time Thune's trying to explain something, Kristen Welker's trying to jump in there. Senator. Bottom line, he's absolutely right. 13 times this has happened before. The Democrats supported this. And now suddenly they're against it. to keep the government for 7 weeks going. And by the way, most of these bills are teed up. So there's 12 of them, and they just have to conference with the other side, and then we're good to go. And they take them off the table one at a time, military, veterans, et cetera, right? So the bottom line is the Democrats, at some point, they're asking for trillions of dollars in additional spending. Not going to happen. So the question is, when do and how do they cave? We need 7, 8 of them, maybe. I think that we get there, but mark my word, it's closing down tomorrow night. Before I bring in Michael Whatley to talk about that, the government shutdown, the strategy to avoid one, what the Republicans should do, and obviously this critical race in North Carolina and how crime has become such a massive issue for for nationwide, but obviously in North Carolina in particular, after that Charlotte stabbing of that Ukrainian woman on the bus. I want to tell you about two of our great sponsors, and then we'll bring in Michael Whatley. If you guys are flyers, and I fly decent enough, you guys probably have experienced delays and cancellations, whatever. Most of the time, that's actually caused by air traffic control. Their system's so out of date. They call it ATC, air traffic control. Fortunately, President Trump, as you know, as part of the big, beautiful bill, is spending billions of dollars to upgrade it. And I'm so excited, whether it's Washington, Reagan, or Dulles, or BWI, all the area airports that I utilize, they all need a massive upgrade. But there's a company out there right now called Peraton that has the 3 needed things to address air traffic control's problems. They've got the people, the technology, and innovation. And we need all 3 of those right now. These guys employ thousands of Americans, the best and the brightest. They're already out there solving so many problems in the national security space. These are the right guys to do this. They already work with the Department of War, NASA. They do all sorts of stuff in and out of space. I mean, these are the kind of people that I want redoing the air traffic control and modernizing it so we don't have accidents, delays, cancellations. We definitely need this upgrade. I think if any of you guys have flown or have family that tries to fly in for the holidays, the cool thing is Peraton is ready to provide America with the traffic control we deserve. Go to Peraton. It's Peraton.com/ATC, air traffic control, just to learn more about what this company can do for us. That's Peraton.com/ATC. These guys, this is the future of air travel right now. Peraton, go check out the work that they're doing. All right, before I bring in Michael Whatley, I got to tell you guys, I hope you saw my rant over the weekend about this both sides. I always try to do something that's an issue that we don't necessarily get to or get to enough over the show. This weekend on this use of both sidesism that the left is calling for, and I break it down because the Democrats, it's a nice talking point, but when it comes to ICE and the threats that are against their ICE, they're not for it. So do me a favor, go check it out. And this weekend, I'm just going to tell you this right now. Boy, do I have a special surprise coming your way. It is so cool. I've been working on this for literally weeks. So you want to hit that subscribe and notification button. And do me a favor, as you watch the show, take the link of the show and send it to 5 friends, because when they start watching it live, that's so important during the premiere. And I know I get a lot of feedback. A lot of you guys are saying that you don't get the notifications, and sometimes you have to physically go in and search the show to join the premiere. Now, I'm not going to say that we're being shadow banned or suppressed, but the right way to do this to help people is to literally send them the link. So if you can do that for me, it's super helpful. And by the way, thank you to everybody who's going to Apple and Spotify. If you're watching the video on Rumble or YouTube or X, love it. But when you go to the audio version, Apple, Spotify, just give us a 5-star link and hit subscribe. You don't even need to watch or listen to it. It just helps the show grow. Please take the 2 seconds to do that. If you go to Apple Podcast, just search The Sean Spicer Show, give us a 5-star review, and hit subscribe. All right, before I bring in Michael Whatley, you guys know there's one other great guy that I want to tell you about. He's been with us since the beginning, Leo Grillo. He's the founder of Delta Rescue. I got to tell you, I love Leo Grillo and the work of Delta Rescue. When I first met Leo, as we're getting ready to launch the show, we were kind of having a conversation about the great work of Delta Rescue. And I had said that I had rescued 3 dogs. And he's like, Sean, that's great. But what Delta Rescue is the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. Dogs, cats, horses, you name it. Abused, neglected, malnutrition, it doesn't matter. They take in all animals and give them the care they need for life. That's the key word. It's the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. They give these animals everything they need for the rest of their lives. And the thing about Leo Grillo and Delta Rescue is there's no USAID or big government grants. It's people like me and you that help Leo Grillo and Delta Rescue. I went to deltarescue.org and made a personal contribution because I've been so moved by the work of Leo Grillo. And I would ask you to do the same. Go to deltarescue.org, check out the videos, make a contribution, do what you can to help Leo make animals live out the best life they can. And if you're so moved, hit that estate planning kit tab at the top. Figure out if there's a way we can make this an enduring mission. Maybe you got an old 401k or a stock that you can donate and help them. So I appreciate everything that's happening at Delta Rescue. Go to deltarescue.org and help Leo Grillo out. All right, I want to bring in the former chairman of the RNC and the current Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina, Mr. Michael Whatley. Michael, great to see you. Congrats on the race.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's time that North Carolina had a solid conservative and President Trump had an ally in the Senate.
I want to talk about this in a second, but obviously tomorrow night at midnight, I believe the government's going to shut down. President Trump obviously trying to do everything he can to make that not a reality. The Democrats, Chuck Schumer, I mean, the funny part about this is you would obviously be a major part of this discussion a year from now. What should John Thune and the Republicans do? Should just stand firm? Should they be willing to negotiate? They need probably, I mean, if you get every Republican, you need 7 votes. I don't know that Rand Paul's ever going to be with you, so that's probably 8. What do they need to do considering the math?
You know, it is absolutely remarkable to me. Chuck Schumer has said 1,000 different times on the Senate floor and in interviews across the country that a government shutdown would be catastrophic for the American people. He said that there are no winners, only losers in a government shutdown. And yet here he is shutting down the government. And he's not just shutting down the government over a clean CR. He's demanding that they put in a liberal, package that the American people have already voted against to really, truly double down on the same failed policies that they lost on in 2024. So it's remarkable to me that we have the Senate Democrats that are in this position where all of a sudden they want to shut down the government.
I agree, right? Like, 13 times this has been their position. So I get it. But let's face facts. Republicans control the House. They've already passed the bill. It sits in the Senate. President Trump says he'll sign an extension. I get it. But at the end of the day, either you need 7 or 8 Democrats in the Senate to fold, or you need to give them something to get their votes. What strategically should they do?
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to go have the vote on the bill. Force the Democrats to actually vote against it so you can call them out on it as we go into this election cycle and try and get the negotiations. Obviously, President Trump is trying to have conversations with Senator Schumer and with the Democrats, as well as with John Thune and the Republicans, to see if the Democrats will actually get real on this conversation. And I think that's important.
I got to believe at some point to your, the way you described this, that Chuck Schumer doesn't have a winning hand. This is the Schumer shutdown because it's what Republicans are offering is a 7-week continuation of current funding levels that Democrats were good with. So that they can continue to negotiate. It's a simple message. It's fair. If you looked into your crystal ball, where do you think this thing goes?
I think we get the CR done. I think we may actually have a bit of a shutdown, but ultimately they'll get this done. What they're trying to do is get 7 weeks to continue negotiation on the bipartisan package that has already come up from the House and through the Senate on these various appropriations bills. As Chuck Schumer has said, we don't want to shut down the government. It doesn't help the American people.
One of the things that amazes me is that we're here. And what I mean by that is Republicans control the House, and I get we technically control the Senate. But we are now at the end of a fiscal year, and we haven't passed one of the 12 appropriations bills. I feel like the system is broken. With your background, as you campaign around, I mean, do you have any solutions for how we fix the system overall?
Yeah, I think you need to front load the conversation. When I was in the Senate as a staffer, both working on the Senate floor and as Elizabeth Dole's chief of staff, we were making efforts all the way through the year to try and get these appropriations done. We had massive bills that were on the floor getting 70, 75 votes. Not everybody was happy on the right. Not everybody was happy on the left. But you've got to go have those conversations. And right now, the Democrats' only plan is to shut down the government and paint it with Donald Trump being to blame. The fact is, Chuck Schumer has never had any interest in trying to get these bills done on a bipartisan basis. They have no agenda on the Democratic side of the aisle. It is just oppose Trump, oppose Trump, oppose Trump.
So I listened to Speaker Johnson over the weekend, and he was saying, "Hey, look, these appropriators are still working. They are making progress." Do you think that like maybe the tactic should be, hey, let's try to get 2 or 3 of these things at a time done, so that you fund the military, you fund veterans, you fund maybe some transportation, and then isolate the real problem? Or do you try to get a grand bargain?
Well, I think ultimately you try every avenue possible. You want to try and get these bills done. If you can get them done one at a time or 2 or 3 at a time, you obviously want to do that. You know, the American people do not like it when we go into the grand CR or omnibus packages, because there's too many things that are going to get put in there. But the fact is, you've got to keep the government open. And it is just remarkable right now that the Democrats are the ones that are saying, after 15 to 20 years of complaining about shutdowns, are the one trying to shut it down.
You mentioned your experience. You've obviously worked in the legislative body, but then you were the North Carolina chairman, and very successful chairman, by the way. And then you were a very successful chairman of the RNC. How hard has it been to sort of make that change from party chairman, fighting for sort of principles of the party, raising a ton of money, to being the candidate yourself?
You know, it's a fairly seamless transition, because the issue sets that we talked about in the 2020, 2022, and 2024 election cycles are the same issues that we're going to be talking about in 26. In North Carolina, voters want to know that you understand their issues, that you're going to put solutions on the table, and you're going to fight to create jobs. You're going to fight to raise wages. You're going to fight for trade policies that are going to help North Carolina manufacturers and farmers and small business owners, that you're going to protect our kids and communities, and you're going to fight every day for our men and women in uniform and our veterans. And so really, truly, the issue sets are the same. And we've been fighting for a common sense America First agenda really, truly through the last 3 cycles. So as we go forward into this cycle, it is a continuation of making sure that we're putting North Carolina first.
Before I get more specific into your race, I want to just ask you to look back on your tenure as RNC chairman. What do you think your legacy or your greatest achievements would be if you had to write them down?
Well, I think first and foremost, obviously, having overseen the RNC during the greatest political comeback in American history, with President Trump winning and being able to take over the Senate and keep the House, is ultimately where you want to go. And the way that we did that was by remaking the RNC back to its fighting form, and making sure that we were focused on what it was going to take to win, and making sure that every single day, every dollar we raised, every dollar we spent was on getting out the vote and protecting the ballot, and not trying to be all things to all people. We really did a great job of putting first things first, and making sure that we were in a position for President Trump to go out and win this election.
Election integrity is obviously a big issue for so many people. Do you think that whether it's North Carolina specifically or the country as a whole, we are in a better position when it comes to election integrity?
We are, absolutely, without a doubt. You know, the fact is that we built a plan in North Carolina for the 2020 election cycle. We took it national in the 2024 election cycle. The fact is that you really, truly need to have the right rules of the road in place before voting starts, so that you've got things like voter ID, that only American citizens can vote, that states need to clean up their voter rolls. When we get those in place before voting starts, you couple that with being in the room. So we had Republican poll observers, Republican judges, we had Republican attorneys in the room anytime a vote is cast or counted. That truly makes a difference in terms of everybody knowing that we're going to have election security there. The tour that we put together last year, our election integrity tour with Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Matt Whitaker, and Laura Trump, was very important for us to get that message out, so every Republican understood that my vote is going to count, and they could go out and they could vote with confidence, and that everybody on the other side understood, if you cheat, then you are going to get caught, you are going to get prosecuted. Very important for us as a party to continue that going forward.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this conversation with Michael Whatley, but I got to tell you, if you are on a wellness journey, you know that sleep is at the core of any wellness journey. And I have made a huge transformation in my life because every night, that's right, you know what I'm talking about, my Beam Dream Powder. I take a scoop every single night, put it in some water, 30 seconds in the microwave. Some people are using milk. I really don't care. It's amazing either way. It's got all natural ingredients, stuff that you've probably tried in the past: melatonin, magnesium, apigenin, reishi, L-theanine, all natural stuff in an amazing, amazing blend. I love this stuff. This is my favorite, the cinnamon cocoa, but I've also been trying the cinnamon brownie, and obviously the peppermint's amazing as well. That's the cool stuff. You fall asleep within 30 minutes. You stay asleep, wake up feeling unbelievably rip-roaring, ready to go. That's what Beam Powder is all about. So go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer for up to 40% off. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. Code word Spicer for up to 40% off. Trust me when I tell you, having a great night's sleep is the key to everything. And Beam is at the core of exactly what I do every night. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. Code word Spicer for up to 40% off. All right, back to the conversation with Chairman Whatley. I don't know if President Trump knew that you were coming on this morning. I didn't tell him yet, but he literally truthed out, earlier today, in order to make North Carolina, which has completely lost its furniture business to China and other countries, great again, I will be imposing substantial tariffs on any country that does not make its furniture in the United States. Details to follow, President DJT. Explain why this is important and how North Carolina is going to react to this.
Well, North Carolina was the tip of the spear in terms of American furniture manufacturing for decades before NAFTA completely wiped out our furniture trades. We still have a number of companies down there who are competing every single day, but they're having to compete with China, who is flooding the American markets with subsidized furniture and other products. This is not just about furniture, but, President Trump really, truly wants to reset the trade agenda that is going to be able to help North Carolina manufacturers, small businesses, and our farmers. I think it's a very important step that President Trump is leading this conversation around the world.
How does something like that go over in North Carolina? Do leaders of both parties get excited about it because it's going to help, or is because everybody's got Trump deranged syndrome, is it we don't like it because it's Trump supported, therefore we against it?
Well, it is rather remarkable that the Democrat leadership in North Carolina, led by my opponent, Roy Cooper, have been on the 20% side of every 80-20 issue that we have seen over the last 5 years. They are fighting harder for criminals than they do their victims. They're fighting harder for violent, criminal, illegal aliens than they do American citizens. They are going to, oppose the big, beautiful bill. They're going to oppose, extending Donald Trump's middle-class tax cuts and no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. So I assume that they're going to oppose efforts to try and help our furniture manufacturers in North Carolina, just because they've been opposed to every other policy the president has put on the table. But there's a reason he won in 2016, 2020, and in 2024 in North Carolina, because he is fighting for the great people of that great state.
You brought up crime. I want to talk about that Charlotte stabbing in a minute. But over the weekend, there was this story in the Associated Press. Police deadly shooting in North Carolina was highly premeditated and location was targeted. It says in Southport, North Carolina, a mass shooting that shattered the evening tranquility of a picturesque seaside town in North Carolina was highly premeditated, that left 3 people dead and 5 injured. How is this just a random act, or is this part of a pattern of people going after, sort of that should be in jail?
We don't know the answers yet in terms of that particular shooting and that particular investigation, but I do think that it speaks to a broader issue on crime, not just in North Carolina, but across the country. The highest, purpose of a government, any government, is to protect its citizens. And what we have seen in North Carolina is my opponent, Roy Cooper, and his soft on crime policies that have led to issues down in Charlotte in particular, where we saw the heinous murder of Irena Zarotska by DeCarlos Brown Jr., a guy who had been arrested 14 times and released 14 times because of Governor Cooper's soft on crime policies. The state legislature has stood up to roll back those soft on crime policies by passing legislation after I called for that bill to be passed. President Trump has stood up and he sent in federal troops to quell the riots in California, to make sure that the streets of Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, and Memphis are going to be safe. Right now, the Democrats are again screaming bloody murder that President Trump wants to keep our communities safe. I think this overall conversation on crime right now is an extraordinarily important conversation because we need to protect our kids and our communities.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I've always said there's two reasons people vote: their personal security and their economic security, meaning do they feel it? And if people walk down the street and don't feel safe, and I got to imagine if you live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you saw this horrific stabbing on public transportation, you can't feel too safe. So the question I have is, how, when you talk about soft on crime, what is it that Roy Cooper, your Democratic opponent, the former governor, did that ties him to these policies?
Sure. Well, the first thing you want to talk about is he signed an executive order in 2020. People remember him marching around the state capitol with Antifa, taking his mask off, and really, truly supporting the rioters at the time. What they don't necessarily remember is him signing an executive order to reimagine law enforcement in North Carolina, which set up a revolving door policy. It ended cash bail in the major cities in North Carolina, and it set up a revolving door for criminals to be arrested and re-released back on the street. He also, on his way out, pardoned 3,500 violent criminal felons and let them out of jail. And this is a guy who fought every day to try and lessen protections for communities against violent criminals.
So is this, when that attack happened in Charlotte, I know nationally there was a lot of outrage. Do people in North Carolina, in Charlotte in particular, which is a pretty liberal city, at least from my recollection of it, do they associate what happened with the Democratic policies, or is that something that you're going to have to connect the dots on?
Well, I think we're certainly going to have that discussion. But the fact is that Roy Cooper's soft on crime policies and setting up that revolving door are directly attributable to having this guy on the streets. And it's not just him. We had two guys last week who shot up an ambulance. One had been arrested 11 times and released. The other had been arrested 8 times and released. We had one criminal who had been arrested, who had been previously arrested 9 different times this year and released. It's only, September. So that's one a month. The crime policies that the governor put in place are very rampant, which is why the legislature, at my request, actually stood up and passed legislation to roll back these policies and make sure we're going to keep North Carolina kids and communities safe.
I guess the bigger issue, though, for me is I think, right, you're right. People are voting. That's an issue that they care about. And obviously, he's got the record. The question is, strategically, how do you get voters to say it's his policies that got us here?
Well, we'll be out there having this conversation in every community in every county across North Carolina. The fact is, this is going to be the most expensive Senate race in the history of the country. We're looking at $600 million that are going to be spent on this Senate race. And when we boil it down to its fundamentals, there is a very clear contrast between me, who is going to fight for North Carolina families, fight for North Carolina communities, fight for North Carolina values, and Roy Cooper, who is going to fight for San Francisco, Chicago, and New York values. And he has a very long record, votes when he was a legislator, vetoes and executive orders when he was a governor, that we're going to be able to go have a conversation about. I'm going to fight every day for North Carolina first values, for a common sense agenda. And Roy Cooper is going to fight for the liberal agenda. And ultimately, this race is going to come down to one question. Is President Trump going to have an ally in the Senate, or is he going to have a rubber stamp for Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders? And we want to make sure that the North Carolina voters who voted for Donald Trump 3 times in a row understand that distinction.
Where do you think North Carolina, like, registration and turnout is trending? It seems like it keeps maybe not full force, but it's at least it's moving to the right. Is that a fair read on the electorate there?
It is. When I took over as the state party chair back in 2019, the Democrats had a 450,000 voter registration advantage over Republicans. Today, it's about 13,000, 11,000. So we've seen a dramatic shift. We are seeing a huge influx of unaffiliated voters, which I think, frankly, gives us an opportunity to go and have a conversation with them in the elections, right? In North Carolina, we're 30% Republican, 30% Democrat, 40% unaffiliated, and other. So we know to be able to win, it's not just with the Republican voters, but we're going to have to win in the middle and make sure that we're carrying a 52-48 majority at a minimum out of the unaffiliated voters.
Do you think that crime, as you just described, is going to be the number one issue in that race, or are there going to be, I get you're going to have peripheral issues. I mean, we just mentioned trade, but is crime by and large the biggest issue there?
Right now it is, right? And I think that ultimately the economy is always going to be a driver in the economy. The fact is that I'm going to be fighting for policies that are going to create jobs and raise wages, and working with the president on his trade agenda to make sure that we're going to have benefits for our manufacturers, our farmers, and our small businesses, right? Roy Cooper is on the exact opposite side of every economic issue there. He vetoed 6 different balanced budget bills that had teacher pay raises and tax cuts. So we're going to have a very clear record of his actions that opposes President Trump's economic policies.
I know this may obviously, the reality is as I said, we might have a government shutdown tomorrow night. I think we will. But you guys also potentially could have some weather coming your way. There's 2 storms tracking up. I'm no meteorologist, but I've looked at the different models. North Carolina could face some kind of peripheral damage from this. I know Roy Cooper has been a big fan of going out and running to climate conferences. How much is that going to be an issue of political football? How we respond to this, and what his position on climate change has been in the past?
Yeah, Roy Cooper's response to the hurricanes of North Carolina, going all the way back to Hurricane Floyd and Matthew, as well as in Hurricane Helene, has been absolutely abysmal. The fact is that when Hurricane Helene hit North Carolina exactly a year ago, this last Saturday, we saw absolutely catastrophic damage. 108 people dead, 73,000 homes were damaged, 45,000 small businesses were shut down. Roy Cooper, Joe Biden, and FEMA were absolutely nowhere to be found. In fact, that when President Trump came down to North Carolina, both before the election, right after the storm, and immediately after he was being sworn in, vowed that he would never forget North Carolina. And the response that we've seen from the Trump administration, whole of government, putting $6.5 billion in relief into North Carolina, is tremendously important for the western part of that state. And Roy Cooper failed on every single one of these hurricanes. In fact, our current governor, Democrat Josh Stein, the first thing he did on his first day in office was sign an executive order to abolish Roy Cooper's failed hurricane response plans.
So as this storm hits, how important is that response going to be?
Well, I think it's tremendously important, and we're going to pray that those storms both find their way back out into the Atlantic Ocean. It seems as of this morning that that's going to be the case, but we are going to be on pins and needles anytime there is going to be a significant threat that's coming into North Carolina. We need the state to do better, and we need the federal government's response through FEMA to be dramatically better. That's why President Trump has actually named me to the FEMA Review Council, where we are right now working through a series of proposals to make sure that we're going to reform FEMA or even abolish it to make sure that we have a better federal response for storms going forward.
I keep saying to folks that I believe, and I want your take on this, that North Carolina to me is the ultimate proxy state. If you support President Trump and his policies, Michael Whatley is your guy. If you oppose President Trump, then Roy Cooper is your guy. Do you think that's a fair analysis?
I do. I think it's a very fair analysis. And I think what we need to make sure that we do is get a higher percentage of President Trump's voters than Roy Cooper gets of Kamala Harris's voters. And we also need to remember that President Trump carried North Carolina in 3 different elections, 2016, 2020 and 2024, because he was fighting for a common sense agenda. He was fighting for an America First agenda, which really truly focused on things like rebuilding our economy, restoring our borders, and making sure that America is respected around the world again. That's the issue sets that we're going to be fighting on in 2026.
You mentioned how much money, and I believe you're absolutely right. To me, that's why I said it. North Carolina to me is the ultimate proxy election next year. If you, and as I said before before you came on, this is critical. This is a Republican hold, right? Tom Tillis is the current incumbent. He's not seeking re-election. If we want to maintain the Senate 100%, Michael Whatley needs to get reelected. And we definitely need a senator that's going to support President Trump like you will. How much outside money do you think is going to flood into North Carolina?
Well, I think it's going to come in from all across the country. There's no question about it. Roy Cooper cannot raise the money that he needs in North Carolina. We are certainly going to get our share of national support because everybody understands that the Senate majority very likely will come down to North Carolina. And this is the marquee race in the entire country. As Republicans, we want to make sure that we hold Maine with Susan Collins. We want to make sure that we hold Kentucky with Mitch McConnell stepping down. And we've got opportunities, to potentially pick up seats in Michigan and Georgia. But all eyes are going to be on North Carolina. And we're going to make sure that we go out and we prosecute this election, in a full measure.
I saw over the weekend, I think, and I apologize if I'm a day off, but I think it was over the weekend, you were at the Faith and Freedom Coalition event down there. Since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I know you've, in your tenure as chairman, both of the state party and the national chair, you've been to a ton of events around the country. Was the feel of that event this past weekend any different than the events that you've been to in the past?
I think it was an important event for two reasons. First off, because of what happened with Charlie. And I think really, truly, that we need to have, a renaissance in America, really, truly, to kind of reflect on what happened with Charlie being shot and why he was shot. That we want to have that conversation around the country. It was also very important because they held it up in the mountains on the day of the anniversary of Hurricane Helene. So it was a particularly powerful event. I'm glad that I was able to get up there and to be able to have that conversation with people at the convention. I think about Charlie, right? And it was not, just the leader of a political movement. It was a father. It was a husband. To me, it was a friend who was shot and taken from us at 31 years old. And I really do think that we need as a country to step back and reflect on, what it is that we're fighting for. We're fighting for our families. We're fighting for our future. And to have a guy like Charlie, taken out at the really, truly the bloom of his life is absolutely tragic. And I really hope and I believe that what comes out of this shooting is going to be a conversation about our youth voters and the tremendous importance that they have in our election cycle going forward, but even more important in our country going forward.
There's two groups in particular that I feel like grew out of this assassination. You mentioned young voters, and then I think voters of faith. And what I mean by voters of faith is not just traditional voters that would go to a Faith and Freedom conference, but people who are picking up a Bible for the first time, someone who's walking in a church, maybe for the first time ever, maybe for the first time in years, and have, to your point, gotten this message that there's way too much at stake. Do you think that both of those groups are going to stay energized as we get ready for the 2028 midterms?
I think that they are, and I think that we need them to. The fact is that in 2024, President Trump won, males 18 to 24 for the first time ever. The fact is that we saw such a huge, significant shift in terms of the percentage of vote that he got from all young voters. That's tremendously important for us going forward. It would not have happened without Charlie Kirk. And when we look at evangelical voters in North Carolina, half of evangelical voters aren't even registered to vote, which makes efforts like Faith and Freedom, American Renewal Project, and other groups that are out there having these conversations so important because we need to have more men and women of faith involved in elections and the public square.
I know that President Trump was obviously instrumental in talking to you about this race. You had a good job. You're the chairman of the party, well liked, and he suddenly says, "Hey, I need you to go do something else." Did you get any commitments from him in terms of him campaigning for you, financial support from his political organization?
Well, what I got was his request to do it and his full and complete endorsement. And honestly, that is such a huge thing because I would not have left the RNC without that. I think that, last November after the election, he had asked me to stay at the RNC through the midterm election cycle. And that was, the course that I was on. I'm very excited about the opportunity to represent North Carolina in the Senate. And I'm really grateful that he called and asked me, to switch gears and to be able to get into this race. I can say that he has certainly offered to come into North Carolina to conduct rallies, and we're going to take him up on it. I'm very excited that we have, a lot of support coming in from his administration already. We just had J.D. Vance down in North Carolina in Concord just last week talking about crime issues and our agenda to back the blue, keep our kids and communities safe. So we will have all of the support from the president and his team that we're going to need in North Carolina. And I certainly would not have run without it.
All right. Chairman Michael Whatley, former RNC chairman, current candidate for the U.S. Senate, which is, as you say, a critical seat as we look to maintain that majority. Hey, thanks for being with us. Obviously, I'd love for you to come back, give us some updates. Stay safe on the campaign chair.
Great. Thank you, sir.
You bet. See you, Michael. All right, guys, we were talking a little bit during that conversation about the government shutdown. And as I said, it's imminent. But J.D. Vance made the case over the weekend about what's really at stake, why the Democrats don't want to just take what they're calling this clean CR and fund it, because they want more money. Well, what do they want the money for? Listen to the vice president.
You have to realize the Democrats, their whole argument is we are going to shut down the government unless you give $1 trillion for medical benefits for illegal aliens. The major health care reform that we've done in this administration is we've made it harder to give your hard-earned tax dollars to medical benefits for illegal aliens. The Democrats want to undo that. And they're saying that unless you give that money to those illegal aliens, unless you give those benefits to those illegal aliens, we are going to shut down the people's government. It's such a stark contrast between two parties' priorities. We want to put the government to work for the American people first. The Democrats want to shut down the government because we won't give free benefits to illegal aliens. It's such a good, again, contrast for what the Democrats stand for and what Republicans stand for. We're not going to be taken hostage by the Democrats' desperate desire to give your tax money to illegal aliens. We're just not going to do it.
All right. That really breaks it down. They want more spending just to keep the government open. And that's not going to happen. And who do they want it for? They want to make sure that people in the country are legal, not me and you, not fighting for us. They're fighting for the people that they allowed in the country the last 4 years under Biden. There's a couple other big issues going on this weekend, though, this week that I wanted to just flag for you. One is later this week, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is going to meet with all of the top flag officers in the country. Those are admirals and generals, 1 star and above, apparently. And they're going to meet down in Quantico, and the left is losing their mind. Oh my God, he's meeting with all these people. And now guess what? The president of the United States, who also happens to be the commander in chief, is also going to meet with them. And the Washington Post and CNN are in meltdown mode. Oh my gosh. Oh, can you imagine all these people at a military base meeting and hearing from the commander in chief, their boss, and the Secretary of War, their boss? Wow. Oh my gosh. They can't. I mean, I still don't get this. Oh, well, there's no big agenda. It's not public yet. It's going to make these guys fly over here. I'm sorry. We face serious threats. And the idea that the Secretary of War and now the President of the United States wants to meet with these folks to talk about what our posture should be. And by the way, there's no public agenda. And all these guys are hand-wringing about what could possibly be the case. It's unbelievable. Also over the weekend, you're not going to believe this one. The superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools, his name is Ian Roberts, was arrested by ICE. The superintendent of Des Moines Public School System was arrested by ICE. He led 31,000 students in the system that he controlled. But here's the problem. He's in the country illegally. He entered the country in 1999 on a student visa. He had a final order of removal from an immigration judge in May 2024. He didn't have a work visa. And oh, by the way, when they found him, he had a loaded gun. Yeah, this is the people that the Dems want running our school system and teaching kids. Unbelievable. But there's one clip that I really want to play to you guys that's from this weekend. And I generally don't play Bill Maher clips or recommend stuff from the New York Times or the Washington Post. But something that Bill Maher said, I think, put his finger on where we are as a country with the left. And I want you to listen to it. I'm going to play the first couple of minutes because this is where we are. This is the problem. Take a look.
The basic problem we have in America is conservatives think the liberals are insane, and they're not completely wrong. Now, I don't think most liberals are insane, but neither do they make it clear they disapprove of the ones who are, and their cowardice in not marginalizing their own crazies has been their downfall. I couldn't get Neil deGrasse Tyson, a genius scientist and preeminent scientific voice in the media, to agree that it was ridiculous for Scientific American and The Atlantic to be claiming that separating sports by sex doesn't make sense. Yes, it does. Actually, it makes perfect sense. And it's obvious that it does. And there's a lot of stuff like that on the left. And when conservatives see it, they say, I'm sorry, we're just not going to go along with reinventing society, often pointlessly, even if we have to cancel democracy to do it. That's what they're saying. They see gender as only a construct and sex is assigned at birth, and they say, we're not doing that. Transing kids by self-diagnosis with no age limit, no parental notification, and no acknowledgement of social contagion, not doing it. Asylum now covers any reason for anyone to come to America, not doing it. Homelessness is a lifestyle. Natural immunity doesn't count anymore. Whiteness is toxic. Penises in women's prisons. Welcoming the Intifada. We're not doing it. And so, folks, if we are ever going to get back to the old America, that's got to be the Democrats' part of the bargain. Stop coming up with radically new and often terrible ideas, and then in the next breath insist there be no debate about any of it. That if you don't see it right away and go along, you're bad, stupid, and deplorable. As if you were saying, duh, 2 + 2 = 5. Isn't that obvious? Yeah, it's obvious you can't add.
All right, that sums it up. That's the problem. And until that happens, we're going to have a problem as a country because Democrats think that that's normal and that's okay. I can't believe it took Bill Maher to say it. Anyway, as I said, thank you guys for joining us. Tomorrow, John Solomon's going to be here. And boy, we have a lot to break down on all of this FBI, Jan 6 stuff. Krista Gall, Caroline Downey, Ashley Hayek are going to be here for the panel this week. Dr. Robert Malone, huge champion of the Maha movement. He'll be here on Friday. And next week, Eric Trump and Robert Cahaly separately, by the way. Well, we've got a lot coming your way in the next few weeks. So definitely hit that subscribe and notification button. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. You can always go to SeanSpicer.com to sign up for my free newsletter. I'll see you back here. Thanks for being with us. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.